What is going on, my broskiis? My name is Toadski, back again here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video. And in today's video, we're going to be having a look at the social media posts that I've been making over on my YouTube community page, as well as on Twitter, or X. And I've been doing these over the past, week or so, a little bit over a week, almost 2 weeks now. And essentially every single day I've been asking you guys on my community page and on X or Twitter about each of these categories for each individual type in One Piece Treasure Cruise. So as you could see, we've got Strength Dex, Quick Sight, Int, we've got dual units, and then we do have versus units. My camera is covering it, but we have versus units as well. And every single day I'm tallying votes from the community to see which of these are universally beloved, mostly well-liked, controversial picks, mostly disliked, and universally despised. If you've been keeping up to date with my social media posts, you already know the answers to all of these that have been revealed so far, but I wanted to kind of cover the strength variation of this, and the Dex one is very close to being done. Tomorrow will be the final day for Dex, so we'll talk about that once it is complete. But let's go ahead and jump into things and have a look at our first one, which was the universally beloved strength character. And it ended up being Douglas Bullet, which I think is a pretty interesting pick. Douglas Bullet is just such a sick character, honestly. Like, ever since he came out, he's always considered to be, like, one of the fan favorites in the community. The really cool thing about Bullet, of course, is the super effective against all types, and he does boost Strength Dex, Strength, Quick, and Int, should I say. And with his level limit break, he got a very nice buff to his special, adding a bit of utility. But the thing is when this guy came out, he basically steamrolled everything. And even though he is super effective against all types, and obviously as time goes on, the multipliers that he provides to your team, they get power crept. But despite that power creep, people will still often go back to Bullet, because just hybriding him up with another high powered captain allows you to do some really cool things. So the fact that he is super effective against all types allows color affinity boosts to work all the time with this guy. Of course, affinity has that inherent drawback where it only actually nets you a positive if you're attacking with super effective damage, and Douglas Bullet always being super effective against all types allows that color affinity to always work. He also has the ability to do end of turn damage, which of course allows you to get around enemy resilience buffs, and that end of turn damage can actually go quite high. It is based on the damage that he himself does. So if he does like 2 million damage, you multiply it by 2, and he does 4 million damage at the end of the turn to all enemies, which is really cool. And then he has the redundancy effect, where if you have normal attacks only, you get an attack boost instead. It's mainly just the fact that this guy is just a really fun unit to use, and with all of that in mind, like, he's just a really cool unit, honestly. And it is a little bit annoying that they did the super evolution on release of this guy, because it meant that, he's basically locked behind getting buffs from Bandai just randomly giving him a buff, or through like level limit break, which he already has. So as it stands right now, we're not expecting to see Bullet get any other types of buffs moving forward. So we move on to number 2 in terms of the mostly well-liked character. For some reason, V1 Katakuri was selected. Now, when I announced that Katakuri was the character that won, a lot of people like immediately assumed that I like hacked it or something, that I had something to do with the overall selection of this character. I was honestly shocked, because the voting between the YouTube community tab and on Twitter were completely different. I don't think I saw a single Katakuri be voted on Twitter, and if I did, it was very minimal. There weren't many there, but there was a ton of people on the YouTube community tab that voted for this guy, and because of that, he ended up winning the selection, which is honestly very surprising, because I remember on release of this character, a lot of people didn't like him. For those of you who are unaware about the way that he kind of works, the way that he works is that he only gives a very small attack boost, but he gives it to 5 different classes, and essentially, to get the full boost of his kit, you needed a character to have both of these classes. So it needed to be Striker Powerhouse, or Cerebral Fighter, or Shooter Striker, whatever it may be. It needed to be both classes, had to be one of these 5 in order for him to give, I think it was a 3.3 times damage boost or something. And then of course, if you have level limit break, the damage was increased. Lots of matching slots, and the way that he works is the amount of damage that you do at the end of the turn, depending on how much damage you do, you have a chance at delaying the enemy. So basically, if you do 1 million damage, you do guaranteed delay to the enemy, and if you do 2 million damage with your normal attacks, you get a guaranteed delay through immunity. And it seems pretty cool on paper, but when you also partner the fact in that his special ability gives you a delayed conditional boost, and it doesn't really make sense because you don't get the benefit of that until the turn after. And even if you get a guaranteed delay against the opponent, if they have some kind of gimmick that activates on the second turn, then that still activates. It doesn't stop the enemy from performing actions. It just stops them from attacking you. So, yeah, overall, I just think that the design of this guy was a little wonky. With level limit break, his special ability is actually quite good. And if you believe it or not, the level limit break of this Katakuri is actually just straight up better than the level limit break of the super evolved version of this Katakuri. This Katakuri is an int version, by the way, and his kit slightly changes, but overall, the strength version is just a straight up better unit to use with a better special, so that's just kind of interesting that he kind of worked that way. A very surprising pick to see Katakuri as the mostly well-liked category. We move on to controversial pick for the Strength Sugo Fest exclusive, and that ended up being the New Year's Luffy. I think this one is a pretty fair pick because on paper, this character is very good. The issue with him is that obviously we have a lot of Luffys in the game, and essentially every major celebration, it feels like, will introduce a new Luffy, which means that there's always going to be that competing edge about like whichever the best Luffy is going to be the overall winner. But the thing about him is that he seems really cool, again, on paper, but in actual practice of using this character, he is very difficult to use. He is a rainbow captain. You do get very high multipliers, but in order to get those high multipliers, you need to activate a ton of super types or super classes on your crew. And that's the real drawback. Getting from Gear 2 all the way to Gear 5 is very difficult to achieve, and the fact that the utility component of his captain effect is locked behind Gear 4 Snake Man, I think is a huge L. This should have been in his base captain effect, honestly, just to help him out a little bit more. But of course, most of the time, if you're going to use him, you're going to use him as a crewmate. The ability that he can provide to inflict increased damage taken up to 3x, like, that is amazing. That is the best increased damage taken special you can apply in the game. He also has that potential to give you a up to 3 times conditional boost against increased damage taken characters. But there's a little bit of caveat with that, because in order to get all of these effects to activate, you need to already have increased damage taken on the enemy side of the field in order to get the conditional boost, or you need 10 turns of end of turn healing, which is very difficult to achieve unless if you are running kind of like the mono fighter related stuff. A lot of the fighter characters like Garps and stuff have been coming out recently that allow you to get like mass amount of turns of end of turn healing. I think the Sabo from this celebration as well also had the ability to do it. He also does remove blue shield completely. He gives you fighter territory, and even just the super special providing weakness buff, which is kind of interesting because he has the best increased damage taken buff in the game on top of also applying a weakness buff. There's lots of things to like about him, but he's very tricky to use because in order to get the abilities to activate, you need to jump through like 10 different hoops, and also it's a Luffy that is competing for that #1 Luffy position on your team. So I definitely understand why this is definitely a controversial pick. So now we move on to the negative side of things. What are the characters that people don't like according to the community? So in terms of mostly disliked, we have the Kazenbo, which is the Kanjuro Sugofest exclusive character. I know that some people in the subreddit Discord were a little upset about seeing this guy selected for this position because there's like a little bit of a fan base for this character, but I definitely agree because this character is just kind of like a whatever kind of unit. This unit was like a side unit for I think Magma Kaido, so at the time it's like, yeah, you don't really need this guy. Driven powerhouse captain, you know, whatever, and then every turn, if he takes 30,000 damage, he automatically activates his special ability, okay, and then the special ability itself, like, it's fine, it doesn't really do anything that crazy. If you have a driven or powerhouse captain, you can boost the effects of your attack boosts to 3x and your orb boost to 3x, so essentially if you have a weaker attack and orb boost, this special can buff those abilities up, very similar to Roger and Whitebeard dual unit. And then if they're inflicted with burn on the enemy side of the field, you make Dex orbs beneficial, change all orbs into Dex. His super type is actually kind of interesting, or should I say super class is actually kind of interesting, being able to inflict a burn, and then also inflicting an attack boost to your driven and powerhouse units. I guess that's kind of interesting, but overall, like, Kazenbo just it's a very average character that doesn't do anything too crazy. It's definitely a unit that you don't need. This character isn't very good in Pirate Rumble either. There's really nothing redeeming about the Kazenbo Kanjuro Sugofest exclusive, and I don't really think it's that bad to be selected as a mostly disliked character. And I think it's kind of fair, because mostly disliked is a very fair spot for this unit, because even though, yes, most of the community don't like this character, there is a small portion of the community that do like it. So mostly disliked is true, with a very small portion of people that actually like them. And now we get to the most universally despised strength Sugofest exclusive, which is actually PageOne. I think a lot of people would have actually forgotten that PageOne got a Sugofest exclusive. The reason why people would probably forget is because it's actually a Rumble legend. And, I mean, Toby Ropo, I think, was definitely a high-voted character to be selected too. This character is a very, very whatever unit. But PageOne, there's really nothing redeeming here as well. The interesting thing is that he is a Rumble legend, right? And typically a Rumble legend should be usable in Pirate Rumble. However, he's really not good in Rumble either. There's just nothing here that is redeeming. So he's a powerhouse fighter, which makes sense. His captain ability doesn't do anything out of the ordinary. You got cooldown, attack boost, matching slots. That's basically it. And then the special ability, you can remove some blue shield by 6 turns and bind. I guess that's okay. You only change bottom row slots. You only lock slots for the bottom row, and the orb boost for powerhouse and fighters. And then after 2 turns, you get another orb boost. There's just, again, very average. It's just whatever. Like, it's a very, very whatever legend. Of course, it's a Rumble legend, so they don't get access to a super type or an EX super. And as we mentioned, it's a Rumble legend. What does this character actually do in Rumble? Speed, attack, and HP, that's perfectly acceptable if the special is good enough. And when you have a look at that special, 33 second, 5k fixed damage to 3 enemies with low HP. For the first 50 seconds, he does a defense down. And if there's 50 seconds or less, he does a further 2500 fixed to 3 enemies with low HP. So, you know, if you don't have anything else, you can put him in. But let's be real here. If you've got a lot of other Rumble legends, like Sakazuki, you would rather use him over this guy, who also has a level limit break and a super evolution. You've got Raizo and Shinobu. You've also got a lot of those other Rumble rare recruits like Sanderzonia, Trafalgar Law, Kaku if you're going up against Dex focused teams. There's so many Rumble rare recruits and other Rumble legends that you can use over this guy that is just so much better. And also the fact that PageOne is not a very popular character to begin with, which really doesn't help his time in trying to get into these high rankings here. So those are the overall rankings in terms of the strength characters in the community. If we just have a look at the Sugofest exclusives that are actually available here, I don't think anything was like too out of the ordinary here. Like, to be honest, like Bato, I've never been a fan of this character at all, but he has one of the better supports in the game, which really helps him out. Log Luffy is extremely iconic, but if we look at it in today's day and age, this character is actually trash, but of course very, very iconic. I did see quite a lot of votes for V1 Whitebeard to be selected, and I definitely agree where people are coming from, because V1 Whitebeard, when this character came out, he was the first legend in the game, mind you. The first legend in Treasure Cruise. And he was worse than the rare recruit Gear 3 Luffy that we had access to at that point. Which is hilarious. So I can definitely understand why people would have potentially selected that. I know a lot of people selected Lucy to be one of the headliner characters for being universally beloved or mostly well liked. Because when he came out, he was the best legend in the game. And I think, to my knowledge, the Lucy Sugofest was the highest revenue that Bandai ever got for Treasure Cruise Global in the game's history, which was the 3rd anniversary. Lucy was monumental for the release on Global Treasure Cruise. We move on to the next page. We've got some dual units in here. Obviously, we're going to save dual units for that. A lot of people wanted this Snake Man to be in the higher tiers and being universally beloved or mostly well-liked, because when his Super Evolution came out, it was probably one of the best characters in the entire game. Definitely shook things up for a lot of people. In terms of other characters here, we've got like Super Type Snake Man was selected for a lot of the things as well. Toki was another character that was extremely popular in the rankings for being universally beloved or also being mostly well liked. This character, ever since this character has been out, it's been a unit that has been a mainstay in a lot of people's teams. I saw Legend Kuma be selected for a lot of good things as well. The waifus are obviously another good pick. Obviously, we have PageOne there being a very, very unpopular character. Izo was another one that people wanted to be in the lower ranks for being universally despised or mostly disliked, because the character just doesn't really have a place in a lot of people's teams. Exchange Ace is a pretty powerful unit, of course. And then a lot of people didn't like this unit either, the Momo Kinemon Denjiro. I can definitely see why. Definitely has a lot of issues, but I think it's fair to not be picked at all, to be honest. And that was pretty much it. I did see a lot of people select Christmas Uta to be a mostly well-liked character as well, because the character is honestly like really, really nice. And that's pretty much it. That's where it brings us here today. So as I said, we're currently about to reach the end of the Dex selections, and once all of the deck selections are complete, I'll come back with a separate video talking about that, and we'll continue to do this until this board is completely filled. If you guys want to cast your votes for who do you think to be the universally beloved, well-liked, controversial, disliked, or despised, go over to my YouTube community tab. Every single day I will be uploading a brand new post updating this list. You can go ahead and follow me on Twitter or X. It's always linked down below in the description, and you can go ahead and cast your vote there as well. And look, even if you got a different, you could cast your vote on X and on the YouTube community page as well, if you are very, very set on something specific being here on this page. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like, and if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. And that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.